The clock above the diner's counter ticked softly, its hands crawling toward noon. Daniel sat motionless, the phone still in his hand, her voice echoing in his head. "You're in danger." The words clung to him like smoke. The rain outside had slowed to a drizzle, coating the streets in a silver sheen. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed and faded into silence. He replayed the call in his mind, every tremor in her voice, every breath. Could it have been Emily? It sounded older, strained, cautious. But there was something familiar in the way she said his name, like a memory half buried under dust. And yet, the fear in her tone didn't sound rehearsed. Whoever she was, she believed what she said. Pier 19. Midnight. Come alone. He glanced around the diner. A man in a brown coat sat a few tables away, pretending to read a newspaper. Every so often his eyes flicked up, not at Daniel directly, but close enough. Daniel's instincts stirred, that old gut feeling honed from years of unease. He dropped a few bills on the table, grabbed his jacket, and walked out into the wet air. Boston's harbor stretched before him like a sheet of steel, grey and rippling. The faint cry of seagulls echoed overhead, and the smell of salt and rust filled his lungs. He walked along the waterfront, passing warehouses and shuttered fish markets, until he reached Pier 19. It was deserted, a line of old storage buildings with peeling paint and broken lights that buzzed faintly in the drizzle. He memorized the layout, the shadows, the exits, the parked cars along the street. He'd come back tonight, but he wasn't walking into that meeting blind. The rest of the day passed in fragments. He spent hours driving aimlessly through the city, trying to stay unseen, checking his mirrors every few minutes. At a gas station near Charlestown, he noticed the same brown coat from the diner step out of a black SUV across the street. Coincidence, maybe. But then the man turned, eyes locking briefly with his, and Daniel knew he was being followed. He didn't go back to the hotel. Instead, he rented another room under a fake name, a run-down place overlooking the harbor. He sat by the window as the sun dipped low, painting the water in streaks of dying gold. The letter lay on the nightstand beside him, the torn edge fluttering whenever a breeze crept through the cracked window. He thought of Emily, her laugh, her hands, the way she used to hum absent-mindedly when she cooked. For years, he'd tried to bury those memories, but tonight they surfaced, sharper than ever. What had really happened to her, and who was she warning him about? By the time midnight approached, the city had fallen quiet. The streets near the pier were slick and empty, the air heavy with mist. Daniel parked a few blocks away and walked the rest of the distance, his breath visible in the cold air. The sound of waves lapping against the dock was rhythmic, almost hypnotic. He reached Pier 19. Only one light was on, a flickering bulb above the old warehouse door. He waited, scanning the shadows. A ship horn sounded faintly somewhere offshore. Then he saw movement, a figure stepping out from behind a stack of crates. She was wearing a dark hooded coat, rain clinging to the fabric. Her hands trembled slightly as she lifted them in a gesture of caution. "Daniel," she whispered, "you came." He froze. The voice, it was her. Older, rougher, but undeniably her. "Emily?" His voice broke on the word. She stepped closer, lowering the hood. For a long second, neither of them spoke. Her face was pale, thinner, her eyes sunken, but unmistakably the same eyes that had smiled at him 10 years ago under the wedding arch. "It's really you," he whispered. She nodded faintly, tears glistening in her eyes. "I didn't think you'd believe me." He moved toward her, but she stepped back. "No," she said quickly. "We don't have time. They're watching. I shouldn't have called you." "Emily, what are you talking about? Who's watching?" She looked around as if the shadows themselves might answer. "The people who took me, the ones who made everyone think I disappeared. You have to trust me. I can't explain everything right now." "Then why call me?" His voice trembled between anger and relief. "You've been gone for 10 years, Emily. 10 years I thought you were dead. You owe me something." Her eyes softened. "I know, and I will tell you everything, but not here. There's someone else involved, someone close to you. If they find out I talk to you, they'll kill us both." The sound of footsteps echoed faintly down the pier. Both turned sharply. A car door slammed in the distance. Emily's breath quickened. "They found me," she whispered. "Daniel, listen, go to the farmhouse, the one near Ashland we looked at before the wedding. There's a key under the porch, and inside, in the attic, there's a box. Everything you need to know is there." "Emily, go!" she hissed, grabbing his arm. "Don't stop for anyone, and don't trust Alan." The name hit him like a blow. "Mercer?" "Emily!" Daniel caught her before she hit the ground. Blood seeped through her fingers, dark against the pale fabric of her coat. He looked up just in time to see a shadow dart behind a storage container. Another shot rang out, missing him by inches. He pulled Emily behind a stack of barrels, his heart pounding. "Stay with me," he whispered, pressing his hand against the wound. "You're going to be okay." She tried to speak, her lips trembling. "Ashland," she whispered weakly. "The attic, the box. Please." Sirens wailed faintly in the distance, growing louder. Whoever had fired the shots was gone. By the time the paramedics arrived, Emily was unconscious. Daniel rode with her in the ambulance, his hands stained with her blood. She was alive, but barely. At the hospital, the chaos of white lights and rushing footsteps blurred together. A nurse led Daniel to a waiting room. Minutes stretched into hours. Then a doctor emerged, his expression unreadable. "She's stable but critical," he said. "You're her husband?" Daniel nodded numbly. "She's lucky you got her here when you did. The bullet missed her heart by less than an inch. But she's weak. If she wakes up, it might not be for a while." He sank into a chair, head in his hands. "If she wakes up." The detective who arrived to question him was someone he didn't recognize. Detective Ray Lopez, a man in his 40s with sharp eyes and a voice like gravel. "You said the shooter was hiding near the docks?" Lopez asked, jotting notes on a pad. "Yes, I didn't see his face, but Emily said she was being watched. She mentioned someone close to me, Alan Mercer." Lopez looked up, studying him carefully. "Mercer? The detective who handled your wife's disappearance?" "That's right." Lopez's expression shifted slightly, something like unease flickering behind his eyes. "You might not have heard," he said slowly. "Alan Mercer retired 5 years ago. He's been living upstate since then." Daniel frowned. "He called me yesterday, told me to meet him this morning. He sounded nervous." Lopez scribbled something down. "We'll look into it." He paused. "You sure it wasn't someone pretending to be him?" Daniel opened his mouth, then stopped. The voice on the phone, it had been off, distant. What if it hadn't been Mercer at all? When Lopez left, Daniel wandered back to Emily's room. She lay motionless beneath the sheets, her face pale under the fluorescent light. Machines beeped steadily beside her. He sat by the bed, taking her hand gently. "You came back," he whispered, "and I'm not letting you disappear again." He thought about what she'd said. Ashland, the farmhouse, the box. At dawn, as the first light crept through the hospital blinds, Daniel made a decision. He couldn't wait. Whoever had shot Emily might come back to finish what they started. He left quietly, taking her letter and his car keys. The drive to Ashland was long, the morning fog rolling across the highway like drifting ghosts. The farmhouse sat at the end of a dirt road, surrounded by fields gone wild with weeds. It was just as he remembered it, a place they'd dreamed of buying before the wedding, a place they never did. The key was still under the porch, just as she'd said. Inside, the house smelled of dust and old wood. He moved carefully through the rooms, every creak of the floor echoing in the emptiness. Upstairs, in the attic, He found it, a small wooden box beneath a stack of old newspapers. He brought it into the light. The latch was rusted, but it opened easily. Inside were photographs, documents, and a small flash drive. The photos stopped his breath. There was Emily, standing beside Alan Mercer, not in uniform, not official, casual, smiling. One of the pictures showed them together at a cabin, dated 3 months before the wedding. Daniel's mind reeled. She'd known Mercer before. Why hadn't she told him? He reached for the flash drive, plugging it into his laptop. A folder appeared, dozens of files, videos, and one labeled Project Helios. Inside were scanned police reports, payment records, and emails between Mercer and several unknown names. One message stood out. "Subject secured. Relocation confirmed. Keep the husband quiet. He's useful for now." Daniel stared at the screen, his heart pounding. None of it made sense. Was Emily part of something bigger? Why would Mercer, a detective, be involved in her disappearance? A floorboard creaked behind him. He turned sharply, but the attic was empty, only the whisper of the wind through the cracks in the roof. He started gathering the papers into the box, then froze. A faint red dot appeared on the wall beside him. Laser sight. Without thinking, he dove behind a trunk just as the window shattered. The shot whistled past, splintering wood inches from his head. He scrambled to his feet, clutching the box, and bolted down the stairs. Another shot rang out, this one grazing his shoulder as he crashed through the back door into the tall grass. The car engine roared to life, tires skidding on the gravel as he sped down the dirt road, the farmhouse shrinking behind him. In the rearview mirror, he caught a glimpse of a dark SUV pulling out from the trees, the same kind that had followed him before. He drove until the road disappeared into mist, blood soaking through his sleeve, the box sitting on the passenger seat like a silent witness. The truth was closer now, tangible, terrifying, but one question burned louder than all the rest. Had Emily truly been a victim, or had she been part of something she couldn't escape? The first light of dawn stretched across the horizon, pale and uncertain. And somewhere behind him, the sound of an engine grew louder. What would you do if the woman you married vanished on your wedding night, and 10 years later a letter in her handwriting appeared on your doorstep? It was a quiet morning in early October when Daniel Reese found the envelope. There was nothing remarkable about it, no return address, no markings, just his name written in delicate cursive that made his chest tighten instantly. Because he recognized it. He had seen that handwriting before, traced it with his fingers 1,000 times. It was hers, Emily's, the woman who'd walked down the aisle toward him a decade ago and never made it to their honeymoon suite. The letter smelled faintly of lavender, her favorite scent. The paper was slightly yellowed, as if aged by time. For a long moment, Daniel couldn't bring himself to open it. His hands trembled as he sat at the small kitchen table of his farmhouse in Vermont, the same one he and Emily had bought together when life still felt full of promise. Outside, the morning fog clung to the trees, heavy and motionless, as if even the world held its breath. 10 years. 10 long years since she vanished without a trace. The police had called it a runaway case at first. No signs of struggle, no evidence of foul play, just a missing bride who seemed to evaporate into thin air before the wedding celebration was even over. But Daniel never believed she left willingly. Not Emily. Not the woman who spent months planning every tiny detail of their life together, down to the wildflowers she wanted by the kitchen window. He remembered that night vividly. Every fragment of it burned into his memory like a recurring nightmare. The wedding had been perfect. Emily in her ivory gown, laughing under the string lights. The music, the clinking of glasses, the endless toasts. Everyone said they'd never seen two people so in love. Then, sometime after midnight, she said she needed some air. Daniel watched her step outside into the cool night, her veil catching the wind. That was the last time he saw her. At first, he thought she might have slipped away to surprise him, maybe a romantic gesture before they left for their honeymoon. But minutes turned to hours. Her phone was left on the table. Her shoes were found near the garden archway, the same place they'd exchanged vows. Beyond that point, nothing. No tracks, no witnesses, no sign of where she went. The town buzzed with rumors for months. Some said she'd run away with an ex-lover. Others whispered about a family secret, something dark she'd never spoken of. Daniel refused to listen. He searched every forest trail, every abandoned cabin, every stretch of road between Vermont and the Canadian border. He even hired private investigators, spent every cent he had left. But Emily was gone. Now, after 10 years of silence, the letter sat before him. Real, solid, impossible. He finally tore it open. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded once. The handwriting was unmistakable. "Daniel," it began, "if you're reading this, it means I finally have the courage to tell you the truth." The words hit him like a jolt of electricity. His throat tightened. Truth? About what? He kept reading, his eyes darting over every line. "I didn't leave you, Daniel. I was taken. And the person who did it is closer than you think." His heart pounded so hard he could hear it echoing in his ears. The letter went on, describing fragments, places, names, a warning that made little sense. "Don't trust the ones who helped you look for me," she wrote. "They know." The paper slipped from his hand, landing softly on the table. For years, Daniel had lived in quiet defeat, haunted by questions that never found answers. But this changed everything. Daniel's pulse raced. Who would have sent this now? If Emily was alive, where had she been all this time? And if she wasn't, who was trying to make him believe she was? He looked at the postmark on the envelope. Boston, 2 weeks old. That was just 200 miles away. For the first time in years, he felt something stir inside him. Not hope, exactly, something darker. Determination. He decided to drive to Boston that same afternoon. The letter was the first real lead he'd had in a decade, and he wasn't going to let it slip away. Before leaving, he went upstairs to Emily's old dresser. Everything was still as she'd left it. Her perfume bottle, the silver locket she used to wear. Inside the top drawer, he found their wedding photo, the last picture ever taken of them together. Her eyes in that photo seemed to follow him now, half smiling, as if she knew something he didn't. The drive took 4 hours. The city was loud, cold, and restless, a stark contrast to the quiet of his hometown. He stopped at a small post office in South Boston, where the letter had been mailed from. The clerk, an older woman with weary eyes, said she remembered the envelope. "Pretty handwriting," she said. "Young woman mailed it. Didn't say much." Daniel showed her a photo of Emily on his phone. The woman hesitated. "She had shorter hair," she said slowly. "But yes, I think it was her." His knees nearly buckled. Could it really be? Had Emily been alive all these years, living somewhere close enough to send a letter? And if she was, why now? He asked if there was security footage, but the woman shook her head. "Sorry, cameras broke months ago." Back in his car, Daniel stared at the letter again. "I was taken. Don't trust the ones who helped you look for me." The words echoed in his mind. He thought back to those early days, the search teams, the friends who came to support him, the people who had been around constantly. Among them was one man who had been particularly close, Detective Alan Mercer. Mercer had led the case, practically lived in Daniel's house for weeks while coordinating the search. Over time, he became a friend, one of the few who stayed in touch even after the case went cold. He'd been there through every milestone, the anniversaries, the grief counseling, the slow crawl back to normalcy. Daniel had trusted him completely. But now, a single thought wormed its way into his mind. What if the letter meant him? That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. He checked the locks on his hotel room door twice. Outside, the rain came down hard, streaking the window in uneven lines. The city lights blurred behind the water, and somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed. He took out his phone and called Mercer. "Hey," the detective answered, his voice calm and familiar. "Everything all right?" "I got a letter," Daniel said, "from Emily." There was a pause. Too long. "Daniel, you've been through a lot. Sometimes—" "It's her handwriting," Daniel cut in. "Postmarked from Boston 2 weeks ago. She says she was taken, and that someone close to me is involved." Another silence. Then Mercer's voice dropped lower. "Listen, don't jump to conclusions. Let's meet in the morning. We'll go over it together." But there was something off in his tone, a stiffness, as though he were measuring every word. "Where?" Daniel asked. "I'll come to you," Mercer replied. "Just text me the address." After hanging up, Daniel sat there for a long time, staring at the phone. He didn't send the address. Instead, he folded the letter carefully and tucked it inside his jacket pocket. Something told him not to trust anyone. Not yet. The next morning, he drove to a small diner on the outskirts of the city, one Emily used to love. The place hadn't changed much. Same red booths, same faint smell of coffee and syrup. He ordered black coffee and sat near the window. Every sound seemed amplified, the hum of conversation, the clatter of plates, the distant hiss of the espresso machine. As he stirred his coffee absent-mindedly, his phone buzzed. Unknown number. He hesitated, then answered. "Daniel," a woman's voice whispered on the line. His heart froze. "Don't talk. Don't hang up. You have to listen to me." He opened his mouth to speak, but she continued quickly, her voice trembling. "You're in danger. The letter you got, someone knows you have it. They've been watching you since you left Vermont." "Who is this?" he asked, but the line crackled. "Meet me tonight," she said. "Pier 19, midnight. Come alone. And whatever you do, don't tell the police." The call ended abruptly. Daniel sat frozen in place, his pulse roaring in his ears. The waitress refilled his cup, oblivious to the storm building behind his eyes. Outside, the sky had turned grey again. Somewhere out there, 10 years of silence were unraveling. And for the first time since the night she vanished, Daniel felt the faint, terrible certainty that he was finally about to learn what really happened to his wife. But not everyone wanted him to find out. The rain began again, soft at first, then relentless, slashing against the windshield in silver sheets. Daniel's vision blurred as he gripped the wheel, his knuckles pale beneath streaks of blood. The dark SUV loomed behind him, its headlights slicing through the fog like 2 hungry eyes. He pushed the accelerator to the floor, tires screaming against the wet asphalt. The narrow road curved sharply through a dense stretch of forest. Branches clawed at the edges of the car, scraping against metal. Every turn felt like a gamble. The SUV stayed close, unwavering. Whoever was inside knew exactly how to follow without losing ground. Up ahead, the faint glow of a bridge appeared through the mist. Old, wooden, slick with rain. Daniel's mind raced. The river below was deep and fast. The bridge barely looked stable, but he didn't have a choice. He shot across it, the wheels bumping over uneven planks. Halfway through, a deafening crack echoed behind him. The SUV had stopped at the edge. A figure stepped out, barely visible through the downpour. For a heartbeat, Daniel thought he saw Mercer, his broad frame, his stance unmistakable. But the rain distorted everything, warping outlines into ghosts. Then another sound, metal tearing. The bridge groaned under the weight of the car. Daniel slammed the brakes, heart hammering. The boards beneath him split, one side collapsing into the river with a roar. The car teetered, front wheels slipping. He grabbed the box from the seat beside him, threw the door open and jumped. The impact knocked the breath from his lungs. Cold water swallowed him whole, dragging him under before he could scream. The current twisted and pulled. The flash drive and papers clutched tight against his chest. He fought upward, breaking through the surface with a gasp. The bridge above was nothing but jagged ruins, silhouetted against the storm. The SUV was gone. He drifted downstream, half-conscious, until the current tossed him against a muddy bank. For a long time he lay there, coughing, trembling, his mind flickering between fragments of memory, Emily's voice, the letter, the photos. When he finally forced himself up, dawn was breaking again, pale light bleeding through the storm clouds. He stumbled through the trees until he found a road. A passing truck stopped after some convincing, and the driver, a middle-aged man with kind eyes and suspicion in his voice, gave him a ride to a nearby town. By evening, Daniel found himself in a small motel near the edge of Worcester. His body ached, his shoulder burned from the graze, and his thoughts were an endless, tangled loop. The box sat on the bed, water-stained but intact. He spread its contents across the sheets, photos, old receipts, fragments of letters, and that flash drive. He plugged the drive into his laptop again, this time careful to back everything up. The file labeled Project Helios drew his attention again. But now, another file had appeared, one he hadn't noticed before. It was time-stamped that morning. Impossible. The folder was named For Daniel. His fingers hovered over the touchpad, hesitation cutting through exhaustion. He clicked. A video began to play. The screen flickered before resolving into an image. Emily, sitting in a dimly lit room. Her hair was shorter, her face drawn, her eyes wary. "If you're seeing this," she said, voice trembling, "then I didn't make it." She took a shaky breath. "Daniel, I never meant to disappear. Everything I told you was true, but not the whole truth." He froze. Her tone carried a weight he'd never heard before, a kind of resigned fear. She continued, "Before the wedding, I was working for someone. Not the police, not the government, not officially anyway. They were a private research division called Helios. We studied psychological conditioning, human behavior, memory alteration. It was supposed to be harmless, tests, data, nothing illegal, but I found something I wasn't supposed to." She looked away from the camera for a moment. "They weren't studying volunteers. They were using people, disappeared people. Some of them from missing persons reports, people whose families never found them. Alan Mercer was their fixer. He found candidates, covered the trails, made sure no one asked questions. I was his assistant." Daniel's heart thudded violently. "Oh, God," he whispered. "I tried to stop it," Emily said. "The night before our wedding, I confronted him, told him I'd go public. I didn't realize they were already watching me. He had me taken away that night, right after I stepped outside." Her voice cracked. "They made it look like I ran, told you I left by choice. For years, they kept me hidden in different places, under different names. When I escaped, I didn't know who to trust, until I saw something that made everything worse." She held up a small, weathered photograph. It was hard to see at first, grainy, blurred, but then Daniel realized what he was looking at. Himself, standing beside Mercer, smiling, shaking his hand. "I don't remember this," she said softly, "but it was taken weeks after I disappeared. Daniel, they didn't just erase my past, they rewrote yours." He sat frozen, the air in his lungs suddenly too thin. "That's not possible." But the screen showed more. Emails, documents, signed authorizations, all with his name. Payments deposited into an account he didn't recognize. Reports labeled Subject 02, Emotional Resilience Study. His name appeared again and again. Emily's voice dropped to a whisper. "They used both of us, Daniel. We were part of it. You just don't remember." The video ended abruptly, leaving only the faint hum of the laptop fan. He sat there for a long time, staring at the screen. The rain outside had stopped. The silence felt heavier than any sound. Slowly, he reached for the box again, pulling out the old photographs. In one, taken at their engagement party, Something caught his eye. A man in the background, blurred but visible. Mercer, standing near the edge of the crowd, watching them. Had he been there the whole time? Had every moment of their lives been under surveillance? He felt the room tilt. He pressed his palms to his face, his memories flickering like a reel, skipping frames. The night of the wedding, the laughter, the champagne, the vows. But as he replayed it in his mind, he began to notice small things that hadn't seemed odd before. Mercer standing near the exit, whispering to someone in uniform. Emily's expression just before she walked outside, something like fear. He realized with a sharp sting of dread that he couldn't remember what happened after she vanished. Not clearly. The days blurred together, the search, the grief, the faces of people who told him she was gone. What if some of that wasn't real? What if parts of his memory had been altered too? He stood abruptly, pacing the room, running his hands through his hair. The flash drive still sat in the laptop, its screen showing a directory of encrypted files. Beneath the main folder was another, audio logs. He opened one. Mercer's voice filled the room, calm, professional. Subject 02 continues to demonstrate strong emotional recall linked to fabricated trauma. Suggest extending observation another 6 months before full release. Daniel felt the world narrow around him. Fabricated trauma. Release. Another file played. Emily's voice weak and confused. "Where is he? You said he was safe. Daniel..." A door slammed in the background. A male voice answered, low and cold. "He won't remember any of this, Emily. That's the point." The recording cut off. Daniel stood frozen, every nerve in his body buzzing with disbelief. For 10 years, he'd been living inside a story someone else had written for him. His grief, his search, his guilt. It had all been constructed to keep him quiet. But why? He closed the laptop, his hands trembling. The sound of footsteps in the hallway made him flinch. Someone was outside his room. A soft knock followed. "Mr. Reese," a voice said. "This is Detective Lopez. We need to talk." Daniel hesitated, glancing at the window. The curtains fluttered slightly, the night beyond silent and black. "Just a minute," he called, his mind spinning. Lopez had been at the hospital, but how had he found him here? He hadn't told anyone where he was going. He grabbed the flash drive, slipping it into his pocket. The knock came again, louder this time. "Open the door, Daniel. We found something you'll want to see." He took a slow breath, reached for the handle, then stopped. A shadow moved beneath the door. 2 sets of feet instead of 1. He stepped back, heart hammering. Without thinking, he crossed the room, opened the window and climbed out onto the fire escape. Cold air hit his face, sharp and biting. Below, the alley stretched into darkness. He climbed down quickly, the metal rattling under his boots, and dropped to the ground. Behind him, the door to the motel room burst open. Voices shouted, footsteps pounded. He didn't look back. He ran. Through narrow streets, slick with rain, past flickering neon signs and empty storefronts. Every echo of his own footsteps sounded like pursuit. He turned down an alley, doubled back through a parking lot, until the city opened before him again, the wide river gleaming under streetlights. He stopped, chest heaving, the flash drive clutched in his fist. The wind whipped against his face, carrying the faint sound of church bells somewhere in the distance. He looked at the reflection of the city lights trembling on the water's surface. Somewhere out there, Emily was fighting for her life. Somewhere, Mercer was still pulling the strings. And now, the truth had split his world in two, before and after, real and false. He thought about the photograph, himself smiling beside Mercer, the look in his own eyes. He didn't recognize that version of himself, didn't know what he had done or what they had made him do. For the first time, he wasn't sure if he wanted to remember. The flash drive felt heavier now, as if it contained not just proof, but the fragments of his own stolen life. He stared into the water, the reflection shifting like a distorted mirror. Then, from somewhere deep within the city, a sound rose, a single, long, piercing alarm. followed by the unmistakable wail of sirens closing in fast. Daniel turned slowly toward the sound, realization dawning in his eyes. They weren't just chasing him, they were cleaning up what was left of the experiment, and he was next. The sirens grew louder, echoing off the stone and glass canyons of the city. Daniel turned away from the river, every nerve burning with adrenaline. His breath came in short, visible bursts under the streetlights. The flash drive pulsed in his grip like something alive, the plastic warmed by his skin. Somewhere behind him, engines roared, dark cars moving fast, coordinated. Whoever they were, they knew exactly where to find him. He ducked into an alley between two warehouses, the air thick with the smell of oil and rain. Puddles rippled under his boots as he ran. Above him, a train passed on an elevated track, its roar masking his footsteps for a moment. He darted beneath it, pressing himself against the wall until the noise faded. Silence followed, a deep, suffocating silence. Daniel's mind raced through what he'd learned. They used both of us. Emily's voice looped through his memory, each word cutting deeper. Mercer had taken them both, twisted their lives into a controlled illusion. And now, with Emily's recording, they couldn't let him live long enough to expose the truth. He pulled out his phone. No signal. He hadn't charged it since the crash near the bridge. Useless. He slid it back into his pocket and looked toward the skyline. A faint glow of red neon flickered a few blocks away, a 24-hour diner. He remembered the face of the waitress from before, her kindness when he'd looked lost. It wasn't safety, but it was light. When he reached the diner, the rain had slowed again, replaced by a mist that hung low to the ground. Inside, the fluorescent lights buzzed quietly. The same woman was there, cleaning a counter. She looked up, startled. "You again," she said. "You look worse than before." Daniel forced a small, strained smile. "I just need a booth. Something strong to drink. Coffee's fine." She nodded, gesturing to the corner seat. As he sat, his reflection stared back at him in the window, a hollow-eyed stranger. His clothes were torn, his shoulder bleeding through the bandage, his face pale from exhaustion. When the coffee arrived, he barely touched it. His mind was elsewhere, back to the video, to Emily's terrified confession, to the files labeled with his own name. He took the flash drive out again, staring at it. How many years had been stolen from them both? How much of his life was real and how much had been manufactured? "Long night?" the waitress asked softly, pausing beside him. Daniel looked up, almost forgetting where he was. "You could say that." She hesitated, her expression uncertain. "You've got people looking for you," she said quietly. "Two men came in an hour ago asking questions. One of them showed a badge, said you were unstable, dangerous." His pulse spiked. "What did you tell them?" "Nothing," she said quickly. "But they're watching, across the street, black sedan." He turned slightly. Through the window's reflection he saw it, a dark car idling under a street lamp, two silhouettes inside. "Thanks," he said, standing, "for telling me." "Who are they?" she asked. He hesitated, searching for an answer. "People who don't want the truth getting out." She frowned but didn't press. As he reached the door, she called after him, "Wherever you're going, be careful." He stepped into the night again, pulling his hood up. The air was colder now, the mist thick enough to blur shapes and soften sound. The black sedan's engine rumbled, headlights snapping on. Daniel bolted into the street, weaving between parked cars, cutting down another alley. Tires screeched behind him. He ran until his lungs felt like they'd burst, turning corners blindly until the city gave way to the outskirts. A stretch of warehouses and shuttered docks. His steps slowed. The sound of pursuit had faded. He ducked into an abandoned storage yard, crouching behind a rusted shipping container. The rain had stopped completely. Only the distant hum of traffic and the steady drip of water from the eaves broke the silence. His heart pounded in the stillness. Then a voice cut through the dark. "You can't keep running forever, Daniel." He froze. The tone was calm, steady, familiar. Mercer stepped out of the shadows, the dim glow of a nearby streetlight outlining his figure. He wasn't holding a gun, not yet, just standing there, as if they were two old friends meeting by accident. "You've looked better," Mercer said quietly. "But then again, so have I." Daniel straightened, his body trembling from cold and fury. "You did this. You took her from me. You made me believe she was dead." Mercer nodded slightly, almost thoughtful. "I didn't take her, Daniel. You did." For a moment, Daniel didn't understand. The words hung there, strange and impossible. "What are you talking about?" Mercer took a slow step closer. "You were part of it, before she ever disappeared. You think you were just a grieving husband, searching for answers? You helped design the entire experiment. You were the behavioral control subject, monitoring her emotional thresholds, recording how far she could be pushed before she broke." Daniel shook his head violently. "No, that's not true." "It is," Mercer said softly. "You wanted to expose us after she went missing, but you didn't realize we erased your part first. You asked us to. You wanted to forget." The air seemed to vanish from the world. Daniel's vision tunneled. He remembered flashes, sterile rooms, bright lights, voices behind glass, a contract on a clipboard, his own signature. "I don't believe you," he whispered. Mercer sighed. "You don't have to. But that flash drive you're holding, it's not proof of your innocence, it's the record of what you did." Daniel's grip tightened around the drive, the edges digging into his palm. Mercer took another step forward. "Give it to me and we can fix this. You can go back to your life, Daniel. We can make you forget again. You won't have to live with it." Daniel stared at him, his mind unraveling. "Where's Emily?" Mercer's expression softened, almost pitying. "You saw her, didn't you? You still think that was real?" Daniel's chest constricted. "She was there. She was shot. She's in a hospital." Mercer shook his head slowly. "No. The footage you saw, the voice on the phone, that was all part of the containment protocol. Emily died years ago, Daniel. Her body was never recovered because you helped cover it up." The world went still. For a long time, Daniel didn't move. The sounds of the city faded into nothing. Only the rainwater dripping from the roof filled the silence. Then quietly, he said, "You're lying." Mercer didn't answer. Daniel's hand went to his pocket, feeling the outline of the flash drive, the one thing that might hold the truth. "I'm going to find out," he said. "Whatever's on here, whatever you did to me, I'll make sure everyone sees it." Mercer's voice darkened. "You think anyone will believe you? You're a ghost, Daniel, a missing person with a falsified record. You don't even exist anymore." He pulled a gun from his coat, its black barrel gleaming under the light. "Give me the drive." Daniel's eyes darted to the side. There was another path between the containers, a gap leading toward the back fence. His pulse quickened. "Last chance," Mercer said quietly. Daniel threw the flash drive, not at Mercer but past him. It clattered against the pavement, bouncing into the shadows. Mercer turned instinctively. In that split second, Daniel lunged, knocking the gun aside. The shot went wide, echoing through the yard. They struggled, fists connecting, boots slipping on wet concrete. Mercer was older but stronger, his movements precise. He grabbed Daniel by the collar, slamming him against a container wall. "You don't understand what you're playing with," Mercer growled. "Helios wasn't just an experiment, it was evolution, and you were its proof." Daniel's hand found a length of rusted pipe on the ground. He swung it upward, striking Mercer across the arm. The gun skidded away, disappearing into the dark. Daniel pushed free, staggering toward the gap in the fence. Mercer's voice followed him, calm again. "You can't erase what you are, Daniel. You were one of us." Daniel didn't look back. He climbed through the fence, tearing his jacket, and ran until his legs burned. When he finally stopped, he was standing on an overpass overlooking the city. The horizon glowed faintly, morning threatening to break again. He leaned against the railing, gasping for breath. His hands were shaking so badly he almost dropped the flash drive he'd retrieved from the ground during the fight. It was dented but intact. Below, the city stretched endlessly, lights flickering like distant stars, unaware of the shadows controlling them. Mercer's words replayed in his mind. "You were one of us." If it was true, if he'd been part of Helios from the beginning, then his grief, his love, his entire sense of self might have been a fabrication. But one thing felt real: the memory of Emily's touch, the warmth in her laugh, the way she said his name like it meant something sacred. That couldn't have been an experiment, could it? He closed his eyes. The wind carried the faint sound of sirens again, but farther now, receding. He knew they wouldn't stop. Mercer was right about one thing: he wasn't free. Not yet. Daniel opened his eyes and stared at the flash drive in his hand. If it contained everything, proof of Helios, his past, Emily's truth, then it was more than evidence. It was the key to unraveling everything they'd built. He slipped it into his pocket and looked toward the horizon, where the first light was bleeding over the skyline. He had one choice left: disappear completely or face whatever truth waited on that drive. But before he could decide, a sound cut through the quiet. A single familiar voice carried on the wind. "Daniel!" He turned sharply. The street behind him was empty. Then he saw it on the opposite side of the bridge, standing still in the fog. A figure, a woman. Her outline was faint but unmistakable. Emily. He blinked once, twice, but she didn't move, just stood there watching him through the mist. His breath caught. Logic screamed it couldn't be her, but his heart refused to listen. He stepped forward slowly, his voice breaking. "Emily?" No answer. The fog thickened, swallowing her shape until she was only a blur. Then she turned and walked away. Daniel took a single step forward, then stopped, caught between disbelief and hope, the sound of his own heartbeat drowning out everything else. Somewhere deep in his chest, a memory stirred, a fragment of her voice from the recording. "If you ever see me again, Daniel, it means they've started over." And as the last trace of her silhouette vanished into the mist, he finally understood that the story he'd been living wasn't ending. It was beginning again. The fog thickened until it swallowed everything. Daniel stood motionless on the bridge, the world around him dissolving into a blur of grey and white. His heart hammered against his ribs, not from fear this time, but from something deeper. Something he hadn't dared to feel in years. The name alone was enough to fracture him. He blinked again, his breath trembling as he searched the mist for her shape. But it was gone, as if the fog itself had devoured her. Only the faint echo of footsteps lingered, fading into silence. He should have run. He should have turned back, left the city, and never looked over his shoulder again. But instead, his body moved on its own, drawn forward by the impossible. His boots hit the wet pavement in a slow rhythm that sounded like a heartbeat. Each step felt heavier than the last. The mist shifted and broke around him, and then, there it was, a trail of light in the distance, not headlights, not street lamps, something colder, whiter, pulsing with mechanical precision. He followed it. The city fell away behind him until the skyline was just a smear of grey on the horizon. Ahead lay an abandoned industrial complex, a skeletal structure of metal and glass, its windows long shattered, its gates rusted open. The air here felt charged, electric, the kind of stillness that comes before lightning. Daniel stepped through the gate, his breath shallow. Inside, the light grew stronger, pulsing from deep within the building like a heartbeat echoing through steel. He followed it down a corridor littered with debris until he reached a large circular chamber. And there, bathed in sterile white light, was Emily. "Daniel," she said softly. The sound of her voice was enough to break him. He stepped closer, afraid that if he blinked she'd vanish again. "You're real," he whispered. "You're actually here." Emily tilted her head, studying him. "You shouldn't have come back." His throat tightened. "I thought you were dead." "I was," she said simply. He froze. "What?" Her eyes shimmered under the artificial light. "Not in the way you think. Helios didn't just experiment on people, Daniel. They experimented with memory identity replication. They wanted to see if consciousness could be copied, if emotion could survive reassembly." He shook his head. "That doesn't make sense. You're saying you're not you." "I'm saying," she whispered, stepping closer, "that I was me once. But when they tore us apart, when you signed the release, I became something else." Daniel's pulse pounded in his ears. "Mercer said I was part of it, that I helped them." Her expression softened. "You did. We both did. We thought we were building something that could save lives. But they used us instead." He could barely speak. "Why didn't you tell me?" "I tried," she said, her voice trembling. "The night I disappeared, I came to you. I told you everything. But they wiped it before dawn. They made sure you'd only remember the wedding, the love, the loss." The words sank into him like ice. He stumbled back, his body trembling. So all this time, my grief, my search, was just another part of their experiment. "No," she said, her voice breaking. "That was the only real thing left." He looked at her, eyes burning. "And now, what is this? Are you here to tell me it's over?" Emily's gaze dropped. "They restarted Helios. New funding, new subjects. I escaped when they tried to transfer me again." "Transfer?" She reached for his hand, her touch cold, almost unreal. "You were supposed to be next, Daniel." The world tilted. He could feel the ground slipping beneath him. "No," he said, pulling his hand back. "No, that's not possible." Her eyes flickered with something like pain. "You've felt it, haven't you? The missing pieces, the flashes you can't explain. They weren't dreams. They were fragments of other versions, trials that failed before you." He shook his head violently. "You're lying." "Am I?" she whispered. "Why do you think you never found proof I existed? Why every record, every photo vanished? Because they didn't erase me, Daniel. They erased us." The light around them dimmed suddenly, replaced by the faint hum of machinery. Somewhere in the dark above, a camera rotated with a soft, mechanical whine. The sound of static filled the room, then a voice. "Subject 02 has re-established contact." Daniel spun toward the source. The walls shimmered, lines of data rippling across the surface like water. Screens blinked on, images flashing faster than his mind could process. Hospital rooms, surgical diagrams, two figures, him and Emily, wired to machines, their pulses syncing, their memories overlaying. He staggered backward, breath coming in ragged gasps. This can't be real." Emily reached for him, her voice desperate. "You have to destroy it, Daniel. The drive you found, it's not just evidence, it's a key. It's what they use to restart the project. If they get it back, they'll rewrite everything again." Daniel's hand went to his pocket, feeling the flash drive like a burning coal. "If I destroy it, what happens to you?" She hesitated. "I don't know." The hum of the machines grew louder. Red lights blinked overhead, alarms beginning to pulse. "No," he said, "not without you." "Daniel, listen to me. If you stay, they'll use you again. They'll wipe you clean, start over like before. The only way this ends is if you destroy that drive. It's the last connection they have." The chamber vibrated, metal groaning under pressure. A door burst open somewhere behind her, Mercer's voice echoing through the space. "Don't let him do it. We need them both." Mercer appeared through the doorway, flanked by two agents in black. He raised a weapon, shouting something, but Daniel didn't hear it. He reached Emily, pulled her close, and whispered, "I'm not losing you again." Then he pulled the flash drive from his pocket and threw it against the metal floor. It shattered under his heel. A sound like thunder filled the air. The lights flared white, the walls pulsing with electricity. The data streams convulsed and collapsed. Emily gasped, clutching his arm. The light around her began to distort, her body flickering like static on an old screen. "Daniel," she said softly, tears forming in her eyes. "Remember me." He reached for her face, his hands trembling. "I'll never forget you." She smiled, a fragile, trembling smile, and then the world exploded into light. When Daniel opened his eyes, the chamber was gone. The building was silent. The air was cold again, real. Morning had broken outside, spilling gold across the cracked windows. He was lying on the floor, alone. The machines were dead, the screens blank, the hum was gone. He stumbled to his feet and walked outside. The city stretched before him, washed in morning light. Birds circled above the river, and the fog had finally lifted. For the first time in years, Daniel felt something like peace and something like grief. They existed together, inseparable. He reached into his pocket, half expecting to find the drive, the key, the proof. But his fingers closed around something else, a folded note, soft and worn. He unfolded it carefully. A single line, written in familiar handwriting. "You set us free." Daniel closed his eyes and let out a shaky laugh, half sob, half relief. The city moved on around him, cars, voices, the rhythm of life continuing as if nothing extraordinary had happened. But for Daniel, everything had changed. He'd destroyed the evidence, ended the experiment, but he knew the truth now. Memory could be rewritten, but love couldn't be erased. He turned away from the river, walking into the rising sun. The wind carried a faint echo of her laughter, soft, distant, but real enough to make him believe that somewhere, somehow, Emily still existed. Not as an experiment, not as data, and for the first time since his wedding day, Daniel smiled. Because even in a world built on lies, he had found something the system couldn't control, something real enough to survive the reset. The sunlight was softer that morning, the kind that seemed to rest gently on everything it touched. Rooftops, windows, the thin silver surface of the river. Daniel stood at the edge of the water, his reflection rippling with every breath of wind. The city moved quietly behind him, half awake, unaware of what had ended and what had begun in its shadows. He'd walked for hours without direction, only following the faint warmth of daylight. Each step felt lighter, though his body still ached from everything he'd survived. The note was still in his hand. The words had smudged slightly from the rain, but he could still read them. "You set us free." He turned the paper over again and again, as if meaning might appear on the other side. It didn't, but it didn't have to. The simplicity of it carried a weight far beyond explanation. Freedom wasn't something Helios could have ever understood. They could replicate thought, even emotion, but not choice. Not the decision to break free from the illusion that someone else had written for you. He sat on a low stone wall and looked out over the river. The air smelled of wet pavement and salt, and somewhere nearby, a bell chimed the hour. He remembered a morning like this 10 years ago, his wedding day. The same soft light, the same stillness before everything began. He could almost see her again, walking toward him down the aisle, her laughter like music, her hand trembling as it slipped into his. That day had felt infinite, like a promise that nothing could break. But now, looking back, he understood something he hadn't then. Moments don't last because they're perfect. They last because we remember them, because they live on in the quiet spaces memory can't erase. A car horn blared in the distance, pulling him back to the present. He rose and began to walk again, through the streets he used to know, but that now seemed different, smaller, almost gentle. The fear that had followed him for years was gone. The weight of what he'd done, what he'd been made to forget, still lingered, But it no longer consumed him. It felt like a scar, something healed but not forgotten. He passed the diner, the same one from that long night. The neon sign flickered weakly in the daylight, half the letters burned out. Through the window he saw the waitress wiping the counter, her hair tied back, her movements slow and familiar. He hesitated for a moment, then stepped inside. The bell over the door chimed softly. She looked up, surprised, but not startled this time. "You again," she said, a small smile tugging at her lips. "Yeah," Daniel said. "I guess I owed you an explanation." She poured a cup of coffee before he could ask. "I don't need one," she said. "You looked lost. Everyone looks lost sometimes." He took the cup, the warmth steadying his hands. "You were right, you know, about the people who were after me." She nodded slowly. "They're gone now." He looked out the window, at the sunlight spilling across the street. For good. They sat in silence for a while. The sound of a radio hummed faintly in the background, some old song from another decade, the kind that carries a strange comfort even when you don't know the words. Finally, she said, "You look different, lighter." Daniel smiled faintly. "I feel awake, like I've been living in a dream and finally opened my eyes." She studied him for a moment. "Did you find what you were looking for?" He thought about it, about Emily, about the truth, about everything Helios had built and broken. "I think I found what I wasn't ready to lose," he said, "even if it's not here anymore." The waitress didn't ask who or what he meant. Some things didn't need to be explained. When he left the diner, the day had fully bloomed, sunlight cutting through the clouds, the air filled with the smell of wet earth and something new. He walked aimlessly until the streets led him toward a small park, one he and Emily used to visit. The benches were different now, the trees taller, but the fountain in the center still whispered the same sound of falling water. He sat there for a long time. Children played near the grass, chasing each other's shadows. An old man tossed crumbs to a group of pigeons, their wings flashing silver in the sun. It was the kind of ordinary peace he hadn't felt in years, and somehow that made it sacred. He reached into his pocket and took out the note again. For the first time, he noticed something faint at the bottom of the paper, almost invisible until the light hit it just right. A set of numbers, coordinates. Curiosity sparked, quiet but alive. He stood and followed them. The path led him beyond the park, past quiet streets and shuttered shops, to the edge of the city. A small coastal lookout where the land met the sea. There was nothing remarkable about it, just a weathered wooden bench overlooking the waves. But as he approached, he saw a small brass plaque on the bench. The inscription read, "Emily Harper, 1989-2015. Still here, Daniel's breath caught. He sank slowly onto the bench, tracing the engraving with his fingertips. "Still here," he whispered. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of the ocean and the distant sound of gulls. He could almost feel her beside him, not a ghost, not a vision, but something gentler, a memory, alive in the quiet. He closed his eyes. For a long time he just listened to the waves, the world, the faint echo of her laughter in the wind. The past no longer felt like a wound, but like a story told in full. It didn't matter how much had been erased, rewritten, or rebuilt. What mattered was that some part of her had endured. Maybe that's what the note meant. You set us free, not just from the system, but from the illusion that life needed to be perfect to be real. He stayed until the sun began to set, the sky painted in shades of gold and violet. When he finally stood, he felt no fear of what came next. The future no longer felt like a blank space waiting to be filled, but a continuation. Something open, something earned. As he turned to leave, he noticed a small wildflower growing at the base of the bench. its petals pale blue against the grey stone. He knelt and touched it lightly, smiling. "Still here," he said again. The road back to the city stretched long and quiet, the horizon glowing faintly ahead. For the first time in a decade, Daniel didn't need answers. The mystery that had consumed him was over, and in its place was something simpler: understanding. He thought about all the years lost to searching, to guilt, to the shadows of what might have been. Maybe Helios could manipulate memory. Maybe they could reconstruct faces and voices, but they could never truly recreate what love leaves behind. That was the flaw in their design, the part they could never calculate. Love doesn't vanish when you erase it. It lingers, reshaping everything it touches. By the time he reached the bridge, night had fallen. The lights of the city shimmered across the water, reflections swaying with the current. He leaned on the railing and looked down, the same spot where he'd first seen her silhouette in the fog. The memory no longer haunted him. It comforted him. It reminded him that even in the moments when the world feels manufactured, some truths remain untouched. He whispered her name one last time, not as a plea, but as a thank you. The wind carried it out across the river, dissolving into the night. Then he smiled, a quiet, honest smile that came from somewhere deep. And in that silence, with the hum of the city in the distance and the stars beginning to appear, Daniel understood the final truth: that we are more than the stories written for us, more than the memories we're given or the ones that are taken away. What makes us real isn't what we remember. It's what we choose to keep believing in, even when the world tries to rewrite us. He took one last look at the city, then turned and walked into the darkness, his steps steady, unhurried. Somewhere above him, the clouds parted, and a sliver of moonlight touched the water, a single thread of silver stretching endlessly forward, like the start of something new. Maybe that's all life ever was, he thought, a series of beginnings disguised as endings. And as the wind carried the faint echo of her laughter through the night, Daniel Harper disappeared into the light of a new day. Not as a broken man, not as a ghost of a vanished life, but as someone who had finally remembered who he was. And somewhere, perhaps beyond what science could measure or memory could contain, a voice answered softly in the dark, "Still here."